Alright, everybody. How's it going? I'm going to be talking about today. Uh, Basically, I'm going to be talking about Russia, China, and Iran, World War III, who created Brics and why, but the focus of today is part one, Vladimir Putin. So, this is a more in-depth analysis that I'm providing uh, than what I did on Brian Eskow's podcast, searching for political identity. So I'll provide the links to everything that I show, but it's 116. I was on this one talking about evil bloodlines, Saturn worship, and secret societies. We spent we spent an hour and 50 minutes uh, talking about this, but I would like to go into it more in depth than what I did in here. If you want to, I do suggest watching that one. I also had a few others on here. Once this loads, but yeah, so it's the I hope you can see the whole. I don't know why this is taking so long to load. Uh, okay, so the other one, like I showed you, I had 116. There was this one about the evil bloodlines, Saturn worship, and secret societies, and then episode 99. Brian just told me that this had like 553% um, more viewers than anybody else this year. So it's the future of money, from fiat currency to the quantum financial system. I go into depth about that topic. And then my first one was down here at 73. Right here, where I briefly talk about the quantum financial system and aliens and more. We on that one we kind of just hit kind of like topic to topic. I would have to say that you know my my podcast, when we kind of talk and interview, it's kind of gives a coast to the coast vibe. Um, Back in the day, if you ever listen to that, because I talk about a lot of things that are coming, and well, anyways, yeah, I just talk about a lot of the things that are fixing to occur in the future. So, but other than that, let's get on with the show. Okay, so I'm not going to go over these, as I would say, verbatim, um, because there's a lot of information in here, and that would take a lot of time. But one of the things, um, but I will provide the links and kind of like maybe the main idea, or if anything's real important, I'll go over it. But here's the thing that's going on with Russia, China, and Iran. Okay, so all of you know that today's world powers are the three city-states of Washington, D.C., London, and Rome. Rome being the spiritual, London being the banking, and Washington, D.C. being the military. Which is interesting now. they want to use illegal immigrants um, for the army, um, which is a bad mistake because the Romans and other empires did that, and that's where everything kind of fell astray, or the beginning of it. I mean, there's lots of other factors, but so as I just went over the three city-states, to me right now you have another. They don't have the city-states yet, but the new alliance of Russia, China, and Iran, where Russia seems to be the military, China seems to be the banking, and Iran seems to be the spiritual because they want Islam to be the new religion, and the Middle East to be the new Europe. And above all this, let's not forget that the deep state created the monster that is China. And China's really the one at the head of all this. And, you know, the WEF and the WHO want China as the new power. And most of the elites are already talking about China becoming the new power. And so this article right here talks about how Henry Kissinger helped create uh, the WEF. And it goes into detail about the history and the creation of it. And the WEF is basically the one that's pushing for all these restrictions and CBDC and all this other BS. But there's that part that comes to play in all this. And then, okay, so let's go into Kissinger's Kissinger and Putin. So, you know, Kissinger died. And before he died, he kind of like talked a little bit about everything. And he basically talks about how America has, especially the people of America, you know, have a bad attitude towards China. And nobody's really heard anything from Russia at all because there's no dialogue, and the crisis in the Middle East and Israel, and he's arguing that the two-state solution was no longer viable and that Jordan should take control of the West Bank. And he fears that the events will lead Islam to a more radical stance that would put the United States in a situation where they have to try and balance the equation. But I do agree, I don't like the dude, but I agree with what he has to say right here, is that there is a leadership crisis in this world today, and leadership is something I'm going to go over. But he's the person who created the freaking leadership crisis. Or one of them. But Putin ended up saying that he called him an outstanding diplomat and a wise and far-sighted statesman in his statement of condolence. That should set off alarm bells to anybody who thinks Vladimir Putin is a good guy. Putin is not good. He's working with the deep state. The deep state want China as the top power. And they want Russia too, and they want Islam as a new religion, and Russia to be the military. Alright, so let's move on to the next thing. So, Brics is becoming what seems to be like this unstoppable force. In this article, Putin and the Prince fears in the West as Russia and Saudi Arabia deepen ties, and this is definitely not good. because Saudi Arabia was why the dollar had so much power. But both China and Russia, like like I said, they're very strategic. They know what they're doing, and they're taking away our world power step by step. First, creating this currency reserve in Brics. And who created Brics, I'll get into that the next time. I'll give you a clue, it's Goldman Sachs, but I want to go more in detail about that. And Goldman Sachs is controlled by Ruth Shield. Remember, it's not Rothschild, it's Ruth Shield. It's German. Ruth means red, and it means red shield. And if you think about red shield, what does red shield indicate? Communism. Um, so, one of the main key things that I want you to show, and like I said, this article is right here. I'll leave the link. But Putin, right down here, the last paragraph above this 900,000 contribution thing, Putin sees this as New World Order stuff, and he thinks that he can bring MBS along with him, said the British officials. The Saudis sit on very powerful assets in oil, which still has a strategic role to play, because oil is tied to the dollar, and now that they want to go green on energy and everything like that, that just takes away more from the dollar. Because our economy depends on oil. It doesn't depend on green energy. The dollar is not linked to green energy, and that's just going to cause inflation to go up. This is the most stupidest decisions that a president has ever made, and not that many people are noticing. But the key here is Putin sees this as New World Order stuff. Putin is part of the New World Order, and I've been trying to get people to see that over and over again. So, here's another article about Putin, how the murder spy claimed Putin was caught on film having sex with boys in the same Moscow flat where Russian prosecutor was secretly taped with two prostitutes. So, and this one's very interesting because it talks about how somebody came out, they had this, it's this guy right here, and you know, this was taken, I forget when, but this was taken not too long ago, but it caused a big shock in Russia that Putin would just kiss the random stomach of a child, and because of that, it caused quite the stir. And this is a pretty interesting read, and the person who was coming out with the info on Putin ended up being murdered. And well, he was poisoned. And this is very important because Putin has killed a lot of political opponents. I mean, if you say something bad against him, you're done for. Especially if you're in Russia. If you're in Russia, mostly, you know. Putin is not a good guy, and I don't understand what is driving people on the right to see that, because you know they're trying. Putin and Z are trying to appear as good, but they do a lot of horrible stuff, and you got to take a look at that. I mean, you got to be able to watch out for the people who appear good but are actually evil. And Putin's one of those guys. He is not a good guy. Not a good guy whatsoever. And people, and just you need to know that. I mean, just do your research on the guy, and I'm trying to leave you plenty of things for you to research about him. Okay, like I said, I'm already at like 15 minutes, so I'm going to be running through these kind of fast. But like I said, I'm going to leave the articles because I'm not trying to take up more than 30 minutes if possible. Um, but here's Super Spy or Paper Pusher, how Putin's KGB years in East Germany helped shape him. And the main reason I'm giving this information to you is, I'm trying to help you guys understand that, Putin, there is very shady things that was going on, and even the um, his even the KGB halted his progress in the Soviet Union, um, because of some of the things that he did, and it's important to understand where he came from, because Putin and the KGB in Russia, that they're a master at propaganda. So I mean, you just cannot believe them. But this talks about where he grew up and some of the things that was going on um, during that time, and it'll help to paint a picture of who the guy was and kind of like where he led to. And he wasn't he wasn't he's not Russian, he's Georgian, or from Georgia. And it just, and this will kind of go on a little bit about his real life and stuff like that. And in order to understand, you know what is coming, you kind of got to understand kind of like what he had been through and how he also rose to the top. And this kind of like talks about that. And there was a little bit of a halt to him coming to the top, um, because of some things that he kind of got into trouble with, like uh, the issue with those boys. And in the last article I showed you, that that halted his succession too. And he made a few mistakes, and that kept him down for a little bit. But he eventually became the person, um, um, who he became. And he puts his political opponents in prison, um, and right here he would, rub shoulders with figures who would later become the Russians' financial elite, and also who went on to become the head of the Russian arms. And it kind of goes kind of like through, how he became power. And in Dresden, Putin defined his life principles. Um, Navalny said, "First, always say one thing and do another. Lies and hypocrisy are the most effective methods. Second, corruption is the basis of trust. Your closest friends are those who have been stealing and cheating alongside you for many years. And third, there is no such thing as too much money." So these are things that you should peer more into, because Russian is just like, I mean, Putin is just like the elites, isn't that? He learned from them. And if you go back to that episode that I did with Brian, you'll see that there's something called the Will of Canaan, where he talks about lie and never tell the truth. And it goes along these principles right here that I'm showing you. All right, let's move on to the next one. So this one right here goes into how Putin is another one of Klaus Schwab's followers. You know, Dr. Evil Schwab. And, you know, it just kind of goes into how Putin is. In January of this year, Putin gave a keynote. Um, this was, you know, in 2022 was last year to address the World Economic Forum. The theme of the January 24th forum, the Great Reset. So he's a part of all this, you know, and Putin used the address to urge for expanding the scale of COVID testing and vaccinations across the globe. Um, you know, he's all on board on this whole one world government because he's going to be part of the person who has control. You know, and you know, the Russian president has repeatedly stated that vaccinations should be voluntary, but his personal opinions has had no impact on actual policy. All 85 regions of Russia now have decrees requiring certain segments of the population to get the shot. You see what I was talking about before? He says one thing, but he does another. He lies. And you know, this is what you need to be looking into is people say a lot of crap, but what are their actions? And Putin is a liar and a fraud. And I think I made my point there, so we're moving on to the next one. Okay, so this is an important one. I'm not going to play this video on YouTube, but you'll be able to see it. And this is just an important one that basically gives you or shows you that Putin is agreeing with the Great Reset and the Great Reset coming forward into fruition. And it's only 2 minutes, but if you want to go to it yourself, you can. The link will be in there. Alright, so this article by The Guardian goes into a little more details about Putin, about kind of like the person who he is, and you should be able to recognize him. Okay, so one of the things that is interesting in her, I mean, a lot of the world leaders are like, oh, he's my favorite hero, oh, he's such a good thing. Z really, really, really likes and admires Putin's strong leadership styles. Um, and, but here's one of the main things. You know, Putin did make a lot of moves when he was first elected. It's not showing up here. But he was sworn into office in 1999. And Brics came out in 2001. So just 2 years, well, probably literally a year after becoming president, because that was New Year's Eve. You know, he started moving towards policies that would bring the West down from power. So this has been a slow but for sure plan. You know, even in his first year of office, he moved to assert the authority of the state and to use warfare to bolster his personal position. Remember, he's KGB. And look at this, the new president reinstated the old Soviet national theme. His promise to protect media freedom turned out to be empty. Russia's few independent television networks were brought under the control of the government. You know, this Russia is not a republic. It's not a democracy. It's not a liberal democracy. It's it's still the Soviet Union. Just you know, and you're just told that it all failed. Now the Soviet Union still exists. I mean, he has the same basic things. Uh, so he's not he's not who you think he is, or as he's putting himself out to be. But anyways, this was another good article uh, that goes more into uh, him and how he's not a good guy, because he's not a good guy, um, because you can see how his actions speak. He says one thing and does another. He's a liar, a fraud. Um, so now, moving back, we're going back to Putin and Schwab, how they go way back. Uh, Putin was a young global leader. He met Schwab in 1992. Um, Putin has argued that the global economy would need to rebuild from the ground up by central banks. And central banks aren't good, but this is a good link to how Putin's just things that we don't know because most Americans just haven't done the research or they see certain actions that Putin does and it makes them feel proud, things of that nature. But this kind of goes about like how he's actually going along with the WEF agenda, with the WHO. He's not really rebelling against them. He says one thing but does another. Did they go along reluctantly just to avoid more eyes or evil doing to Russia, or they participated eagerly in euthanasia? You know, you can see that Russia's participating in um, the euthanasia thing, especially, you know, having the vaccine, wanting the kids to have vaccines at the age of 2. So uh, this is no surprise, and it's worth the read and everything of that nature because like I'm gonna keep reiterating, you know, Putin is all for the Great Reset. And I'm hoping that this is waking Americans up because Putin is not good. But let's move on to the next one. Here's another important article that talks about like their strategy, you know, and how Putin is part of the world order. Um, and it basically how he's working it is through, talks about what Kissinger has said, or some things that I iterated, and then how David Rockefeller's infamous Trilateral Commission outlined essentially the same plan that Kissinger said that to the contemporary quest for world order will require coherent strategy to establish a concept of order within various regions and to relate these regional orders to one another. And that's where you're getting like the EU. They want to combine like North America into like Mexico, Canada, and the United States. They want to make a regional Latin America, which might be attached to the North America. See, and Putin is pursuing this New World Order scheme via the regionalization approach. And I hope all this is starting to make sense because that's what they're doing. Russia and China have already been to Brazil and South America. I hope Argentina stays out of it, but I think recently he's talked to Putin or Z or something like that. So we'll have to see. And what I'm hoping he doesn't do is take away the uh, central bank and then establish uh, just a CBDC thing or something like that. So these are things you have to look at when people when certain politicians talk about taking away things. What are they going to replace them with? Is the question that you should be asking. Um, because the United States can be like, oh yeah, we're gonna disabandon uh, the Board of Education or something like that, but we'll let the UN take charge of it. See, that is where things get messed up. So if a politician speaks about uh, taking away a certain part of something, then your first response is, well, what is going to replace it? And is it going to be something connected to the New World Order? So let's move on to the next one. Okay. Uh, this one's quite interesting because it talks about how Putin is a Rothschild controlled Jewish grandmaster put in power to usher in the Antichrist. And there's a lot when it comes to the Antichrist and things like that. This is a time, but all this kind of makes me think that they're trying to rush certain things in order to create this end of the world situation. Um, so, and I know I passed the 30-minute mark, and like I said, I'm sorry that this might be long, but this is why I had to divide it in two parts because I thought it was very important to go over Putin and to provide you guys some good research with just about who Putin really is because a lot of us seem to be ignorant of who this guy is. Um, but this goes on to talk about like how Putin is connected in the whole scheme of things and how it's all a lot of bullshit. Um, and it's bullshit and that it's happening. I don't. And apparently he's a Jew, probably a fake Jew. I don't think Vladimir Putin is a real Jew, but it does. Putin is the Masons of the Royal Ark and is a Grand Master. Um, and maybe they are trying to prop Putin up as the Antichrist. Uh, I don't know. Uh, but this goes into also his family history and how uh, he's a part of everything. Uh, and it's a very, very interesting read and pictures of his Jewish connection and things that he's done and the people around him have done and his political activity and just a lot of things. Um, Putin is part of Satanism. I'm trying to show you the real truth behind everything, and I I hope you see exactly where all this is going. And it's going to what I've been saying before all along, where we're going to be heading into World War III. And I'm trying to prepare your minds for this reality because you need to come to grip with this, that this is going to happen. And while Biden's already in the process of starting it. It's going to be the next president we elect that's going to take us through it. There is no escaping this at this point. This is going to happen. Okay. I'm just going to go over this one real fast, but this goes over how Putin are Rothschild agents, and it just goes over how Vladimir Putin was created by this guy right here, an agent of Jacob Rothschild, who controls the oligarchs in Russia that control Putin. So, you really got to get into the sticky details of things and go deep into why all this is really going on. And like I said, this is another good article that goes into who actually controls Russia. And you got to think, like I said before, Rothschild is not the way I pronounce it. It's Rothschild. The old German word for red was Ruth, and then the SCHILD is shield, and it means red shield, which relates back to communism. And this is all about them putting communism as the one world government to control us, and for them to have whatever they want, to continue their satanic ways, which Putin is a part of. Make no mistake about it. This part is false because they will destroy the dollar. But just won't be just them alone that takes care of the dollar. But but it's taken a lot of countries because then another thing is they have to have the military might to defeat us, which right now they really could, because Biden made our military suck. All right, on to the next one. Here's another important one that you should take a look at. Is Russia is set to launch Islamic banking? All you need to know. And this is just more into supporting the whole idea that Islam is the religion that they want in the world instead of Christianity. Why? Because Islam has satanic roots. If you look up the etymology of Baphomet, you'll find out that it comes from the word Baphomet, which is Muhammad's real name, and the Baphomet is satanic. And Islam is a satanic religion. They even say that they believe that their descendants go back to Ishmael and Abraham's first son before Isaac, and this is basically a conflict between religions, and this is World War III is going to be in some sense a religious war. But one of the main things that's interesting about Islam banking is there's no credit system in that. So that's something that's gonna, be done away with. So no more buy now, pay later stuff. Okay, so now we're in the final part here. I want you to hear this speech right here. Uh, it's just a minute 7. This will be the last thing I leave you with. Because I think it's important. So, here we go.
On early 92, Russia would get Alaska, like they're saying now. Last week, a couple of Russian officials said, we are taking
Actually,
Alaska.
here, right
There's
there,
a billboard.
that's the billboard in Russia, which
Right.
I don't speak Russian, but I believe it says Alaska is ours.
That's right. That's what that says. And so they're proclaiming it, just like Babe Ruth, when he would hit, I'm going to hit the home run over left field. They're saying it. They're orienting their own people to what's going to happen. So their own people will understand what they're doing. We just look at it and go, it's just propaganda. We don't believe it. No, it's not. They are orienting their people, and that we are so disoriented that they can speak openly about what they're planning to do now. And we don't hear it because we have listened to narratives that don't allow us to hear it.
Yeah. Well,
See,
here's a question I have is, so art of war, one of those fundamental principles is when you're strong, act weak, when you're weak, act strong, right?
Yeah.
So, right now, in my opinion, America probably has never looked weaker. So,
all right. Well, that was the final gist. Sorry that this took longer than normal, but I believe it was worth it. It was the main reason why I also kind of didn't go through everything in detail. But I am going to leave you the links for you to research these things and look more into them to give you a guide. And other than that, have a wonderful day. And this has been a Putin Sucks production.